So I recently watched this America's Next Top Model documentary that everybody is talking about. And while I think a lot of it was pretty grotesque and I was horrified by a lot of things that I saw, I also think that there is a disproportionate amount of cultural rage that I think is stemming from a certain discharge of information that everybody is reckoning with over the last couple weeks that has no area of accountability. I think that some of that energy is being discharged upon Tyra Banks and America's Next Top Model as a proxy of holding someone or something accountable for the horrors of what happened to women in the early 2000s because she is an accessible target. Okay, at the end of the day, I think America's Next Top Model is a time capsule of a very dark time in pop culture, but also represents an attempt to meaningfully push the culture forward in terms of inclusivity. There were a lot of, this is not to say there were not a lot of horrible, horrific, disgusting things that happened on that show, and this is also not to absolve or rationalize any of the dark things that happened on the show. All I'm saying this is to do is to kind of further contextualize it in the cultural zeitgeist that existed at that time. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. Before I even get started, I want to start by saying what happened to Shandy was unequivocally SA, okay? Unequivocally, right? That should never have happened. It should have never been filmed. And I agree that the producer should have intervened, okay? That was really, really, really disgusting. Another thing that was straight up outrageous was that race swapping shit. My girl, hey, yo, how is you cool? Like, how could you do something that crazy? Not once, but twice, okay? There was no world under which that was okay, right? Neither of those two things, no cultural moment, no cultural zeitgeist rationalizes things that are that sick from happening, okay? So that does not, like, I am not at any level attempting to rationalize any of those things. So I really want to take a look at the Shandy thing and take a look at the race swapping thing and look at that and be like, this is unequivocally condemnable, and take that and kind of put a pin in it. And I want you to understand that I'm putting that in a certain box of this was disgusting, unacceptable, and people should be held accountable for this, and kind of putting that to the side when I'm making a wider argument, okay? However, I will kind of contextualize some things, right? Early 2000s reality TV was literally an ethical wasteland. I equate it to like the Tuskegee experiment and like the Stanford prison experiment. Like experiments done on human beings without any sort of ethical boundaries. I do not think that reality TV has actually improved that much, but I will tell you that at that time frame, I remember the real world seeing open, flagrant racism. Same thing with Shadow Love at Tila Tequila. I remember on Jersey Shore watching Ronnie destroy Sammy's possessions in a brutal act of domestic violence without intervention. And it just was a wild time on television. It was a total free-for-all. The thing that's really sad is that I don't think that free-for-all has really actually changed, because as recently as like 2 years ago, wasn't there another incident very similar to the Shady incident on Below Deck? Yeah, so reality TV fundamentally in and of itself, I honestly think is fundamentally unethical. It is a medium that is devoid of ethics, but that we watch because I think as human beings, we enjoy watching each other get exploited. But that has more to do with the baseness of our nature, you know, which isn't to rationalize what happens on reality TV, but it is to kind of contextualize it a bit further, okay? I also think that the Shandy incident was a product of what I would describe as grape culture, which was basically very rampant and highly pervasive in a deeply misogynistic and dark time in our culture. Women were routinely slut shamed for the things that happened to them. And this was pre-Me Too, where a lot of these concepts maybe were present and people were aware of them, but they weren't culturally enforced with like a uniform form of language. And I think that understanding the context does not excuse the harm that happened, but it does kind of clarify that there was a systemic rot going on that wasn't confined to one incident or one show. Doesn't mean that it was okay and doesn't mean it should have happened, but it does kind of provide a broader context of the zeitgeist that existed at the time, okay? And here's the thing. I do not think that Tyra Banks is that great of a person. I don't think that she's a saint. I actually don't even think that she's a good person, quite frankly, okay? She's grandiose, she's deeply self-interested, and her values were very distorted by proximity to power, right? But I also think that America's Next Top Model, despite being harmful and deeply flawed, moved the culture forward, okay? Obviously, by today's standards, America's Next Top Model was fatphobic, misogynistic, and racist, right? But relative to its own time, it actually pushed an industry that had almost exclusively been white and rail thin into including other types of bodies, other types of people, other types of appearances. And even though the contestants themselves, like Danny was saying, one of the contestants may not have gone on themselves to have successful high fashion modeling careers, with the exception of Winnie Harlow, a lot of them went on to have successful commercial modeling careers. And honestly, I think winners like Danny, Yaya, and Eva really created the cultural space that allowed the American zeitgeist to think of Black women as being top models. And even if they themselves were not used as top models, I think that they opened the door for the Chanel Imans, the Jordan Dunns, the Joan Smalls, like coming forth and being models that were very, very widely sought after in the subsequent years, that I do not think have their careers without those girls cracking open the window through America's Next Top Model. So here's the thing, like, and I think that that should be remembered and recognized. And it must be noted that cultural change is not always about perfection. It's just about progress. And I do think that despite a lot of its massive, massive, massive dark-sided and grotesque flaws, America's Next Top Model represented progress, okay? Another thing that I want to say too about the early 2000s. The early 2000s, the body standards were grotesque and disgusting, okay? It was defined by heroin chic body standards. So we're talking like the Paris Hiltons, we're talking Kate Moss, we're talking early Britney Spears. But Britney Spears herself was torn down maliciously and violently fat shamed for a perfectly beautiful, perfectly thin body that in the 2007 VMAs, I will never forget the way that it was plastered all over the magazines. A fat cow Britney Spears dances to Gimme More on stage. Like, look at this picture. This girl, you can literally see her ribcage and she clearly has abs. Her BMI can't be over 21. This is what people called fat and disgusting. And they derided her as like basically a cow. And it's like, it's alarming when you look at it, especially now, given what the beauty standards are. But it was a very different, very dark time, you know? And America's Next Top Model, I really think it's important to understand that it existed within that reality, not outside of it. You have to understand the culture at the time. It doesn't excuse it. It doesn't make it okay, but it does create context. And you have to and give it. And when you understand that context, you'll understand that what Tyra was doing actually was pushing the culture forward in certain ways. She included Black contestants. She included plus size contestants. She included women who have otherwise been excluded from modeling in general. And yes, she used harmful language. Yes, she reproduced fat phobia. Yes, she reproduced respectability politics. But her imagination was limited by the cultural zeitgeist at the time. But from where she was standing, she was creating a progress. And I think that she should be recognized for that. I also think that right now, the reckoning that is going on with America's Next Top Model is a bit of displacement. There's a lot of horrible stuff floating around in the zeitgeist right now that I don't really feel like specifically mentioning, but I think y'all know what I'm talking about, right? And there's a lot of very powerful figures, and some of the most powerful figures that exist in our country, who blatantly did horrible, disgusting, abhorrent things that should never be thought about or spoken of, who are just still in power, untouchable. And that really, I think, upsets and disturbs a lot of people. And it creates a sort of cultural unrest that needs to be discharged at a target that is toppleable, that is touchable, that is removable from their platform, right? And I think Tyra, as a Black woman, a powerful Black woman, but a Black woman nonetheless, is an easy target for a lot of that cultural rage, right? And that is really historically what happens to Black women. They are often used as scapegoats for broader cultural failures and broader societal failures. I think that there is genuine critique to be had. Again, the Shandy thing, never event. The race swapping thing, never event. Also, she was really terrible to the Jays and Nigel, never event. Shouldn't have happened, right? Selfish, gross, right? But it does not mean that she is responsible for all of the evils that happened in the culture in the early 2000s. I think that that is unfair. And I think that it is also like a little bit racist. And I think that that impulse should be examined, right? I hear a lot of people saying like, Tyra's not showing any level of accountability. Listen, I do think that her sitting down and doing the documentary in general is better than her not showing up at all, okay? And I know that that might be a little bit of like a controversial take, but she could have not shown up the way that Janice Dickinson did not show up. She at least answered the questions and tried to be present for it, even if her capacity for real understanding was totally limited, okay? I think that that is better than nothing. It's not enough, but it is better than nothing. And it is more than that I would really expect from her, given what America's Next Top Model was in the zeitgeist at the time in terms of being a vessel promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know what I mean? Sorry I said it, but it's real, you know? Anyway, you can't build a better culture by erasing history, right? Like at the end of the day, 2003 culture was a very dark time in our society, but America's Next Top Model, I truly feel is a time capsule of that time, but also need to be people need to understand that it did meaningfully move the culture forward, okay? And create space for a bit more inclusivity and open the door for the culture that we have today in 2026, where we have the language of inclusivity, the language of justice, the language of anti-racism, the language of body positivity. All of that stuff, I really do think that America's Next Top Model is part of the bricks in the foundation of building that, okay? So, in conclusion, America's Next Top Model was deeply flawed, very harmful, oftentimes grotesque, right? But in the moment, I actually think it was one of the better forces of pop culture that was pushing the needle forward, right? I think that there are things that happened on that show that were despicable, disgusting. I think that what happened to Shandy should never have happened. I think that was a disgusting and vile thing. I also think, though, that reality TV fundamentally was, and to be honest, continues to be a deeply, deeply unethical thing that basically strips human beings of their dignity in favor of entertainment. And I don't think that America's Next Top Model is any exception to that. I also do not think that Tyra Banks is above critique. I do think that she is a very, 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 very flawed human being. But whether she should be bearing the sins of the early 2000s on her back is, I think, another discussion. I think it takes it a bit too far. Okay. And so I think the two things can be true at once. America's Next Top Model can be grotesque and kind of horrific and way more than cringe, like kind of frightening to look back upon, but it also could have meaningfully moved the culture forward and be part of creating a modeling industry that was more inclusive. That's a dialectic, right? Two things can be true at once. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. It's food for thought, all right? So I will talk to you guys later. Sound off in the comments. Let me know if you agree with me or disagree. And we will discuss. All right. I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Also, new weave who dis, guys. Do you not love my hair? This was done by my hairstylist, Jessica, who I am going to tag down below in my description box. Girl, she ate with this hair, okay? I'm feeling like a mermaid model goddess, okay? This was like perfect for my America's Next Top Model video, right? Don't I look, isn't it something? I'm just playing. All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye. I gotta do my best demise for you guys. How did I do? All right, I'm going. Bye.